will see in greater detail a bit later in this film, is a glimpse of the United States Army in the years that lie just ahead of us. This is a report on the Army's effort to prepare for the challenges of that future. It is a report on the Army's effort to achieve a sharper sword and stronger shield with which it can do its assigned part in preserving the peace, or if necessary, defending the nation and the free world against whatever enemy might rise against it.
Using the huge amounts of information he intercepted from the alien transmissions, Paul Bennewitz created a document called Project Beta. Project Beta included the alien takeover plan, and a strategy to defeat them, and a weapon we can use against them. He even built a working prototype of this energy weapon. Project Beta said that the aliens had abducted, conservatively, 300,000 Americans, and they've all been implanted with devices and returned to the general population. And these implants turned every human into a walking camera and microphone. And the implants can be used to create false memories, seize control of the mind, or even switch the brain off altogether. And experiments were being done in the base under Dulce. Horrific genetic experiments like splicing alien DNA with humans. And Paul Bennewitz sent Project Beta to his senators and other elected officials, even to the President of the United States. The only reply he got was a standard form letter that said Project Blue Book has been closed and the Air Force no longer investigates UFOs. Paul knew this was a lie. He had the Project Aquarius document that proved it. The only thing that made sense was that the government was compromised. It could be that senior military officials, politicians, and even the president himself could have been implanted. And over the next couple of years, Paul Bennewitz became more and more frustrated and paranoid. When Bill Moore and Richard Doty paid him a visit to check on his mental state, it wasn't good. Paul kept knives and guns all over the house. He insisted that he was being watched and followed all the time. He lost so much weight that he looked ill, and he was smoking a full pack of cigarettes every hour. He said the aliens were coming into his house at night, injecting him with something that made him drive out into the desert. Then he'd be back home with no recollection of what happened. Both Bill Moore and Richard Doty said they saw needle marks on his arm. By now, Bill Moore, Richard Doty, and all Paul's friends were telling him to stop, to leave it alone. Paul's family begged him to stop. They wanted him to destroy all the equipment and go back to focusing on his business. But Paul wouldn't do it. His research was too important. Paul's mental health continued to decline. He didn't trust anyone around him. He thought his wife had an alien implant. His children had to take over his business. He became so paranoid that one day he barricaded himself in his house and covered every door and window with sandbags. His family had seen enough. They committed Paul to a psychiatric facility. And after multiple hospitalizations, Paul Bennewitz died in 2003 at the age of 75. He spent the last 25 years of his life paranoid, obsessed, and in mental agony because he could not get anyone to believe what he knew about the aliens. Even with all the evidence, it literally drove him insane. But what's really sad is, none of it was necessary, because the entire story about the aliens, the secret base, the transmissions, the genetic experiments, the abductions, the plot to take over the world, all of it was a lie. It was all a made-up story fed to him by Richard Doty and the United States government.
You gotta be freaking kidding me.
The Air Force Office of Special Investigation, or OSI, has a couple of purposes. One of those is counterintelligence. A common technique of counterintelligence is disinformation. When Paul Bennewitz intercepted signals from Kirtland Air Base, he didn't really think they were aliens, not at first. He was concerned that if he could detect transmissions from the base, then anyone could, including Soviet spies. And after reviewing Paul's equipment and research in detail, the Air Force realized that Paul was right. The signals were coming from the base and were vulnerable. That's a problem. When the Air Force reviewed Paul's photos and film, the objects that seemed to be UFOs were actually secret experimental aircraft. That's another problem. But rather than tell Paul Bennewitz the truth, which according to the Air Force would compromise security, Special Agent Richard Doty was given an assignment. Feed Paul Bennewitz information to lead him to believe that he discovered a hostile alien presence.
Why not just tell him to back off?
Because the Air Force didn't know who Paul's friends were. If Paul was compromised by a Soviet agent, the Soviets would know there were secret projects happening on the base, so the Air Force would go a different way. Now, at first, this was just a simple nod from Doty,
All I had to do was say, well, you know what, Paul? Maybe what you didn't see was UFOs.
So nothing very specific. But over time, the lies Doty told Paul became more detailed. And other government agencies got in on the action. At some point, Paul was sure he was being watched from the vacant house across the street. Now, it was easy to say this was Paul's paranoia and not take him seriously. But Paul was right. The National Security Agency was surveilling him from that house. And to make things even worse, the alien transmissions that Paul decoded, they were actually sent from the NSA. The NSA also swapped out Paul's computer to ensure that he would decode the messages the way they wanted him to see them. It was all fake, and Paul Benowitz ate it up, and suffered because of it. Paul was a victim of the government's counterintelligence plan, but he wasn't the only one.
Look, we've established in history and documents in the Freedom of Information Act, the CIA and the military complex as a whole has really aimed to essentially mislead the public when it comes to UFOs, tell them something that necessarily is not the truth. We've seen it time and time again, through the decades, over and over and over.
When author Bill Moore's celebrity within the UFO community was at its peak, he was contacted by someone in government intelligence. We now know that was Richard Doty. Doty offered Bill Moore a deal. Moore would receive government documents on UFOs and learn what the government was hiding. But in exchange, he would disseminate Doty's fake UFO stories and report on people within the UFO community. Doty wanted to know who the UFO enthusiasts were and what they knew. The fear was that if Paul Benowitz could intercept secret military data, then other people could. Now, it's never been confirmed, but it's believed that during this time, the United States was building and testing either stealth or drone technology at Kirtland Air Base. This was information that absolutely could not fall into an enemy's hands. So this is how Paul Benowitz came to know Bill Moore. It was a setup. Moore was given the Aquarius document and instructed to give it to Paul. But here's where the counter-intel campaign starts to get sloppy. Bill Moore had seen the Aquarius document. Of course, he was fascinated by it. And at that time, Moore thought the information and documents he was getting were legitimate. But when Moore was given the Aquarius document to forward to Paul Benowitz, it was different. Details were changed. Doty brushed off Moore's concerns. He said the document was sanitized and redacted for security reasons. Moore didn't believe it. Obviously, the plan was to get Paul to go public with the Aquarius document. Then the government steps in to discredit him. This meant Moore was now specifically being asked to lie to a fellow UFO researcher on behalf of the U.S. government, a man he considered a friend, and help the government destroy his friend's reputation. Moore was conflicted, so he didn't do anything, not for months. Then Doty told him, deliver the document or never hear from me again. So Moore did as he was told and delivered the fraudulent Project Aquarius document. But trying to protect him, he begged Paul to never speak of it. So Special Agent Doty had Paul Benowitz covered on the Kirtland Air Base side, but he still needed to address the issue of underground bases near Dulce that Paul was convinced he saw. So Doty and the OSI put props all around the area. They set up domes and air vents and even what looked like alien craft. They littered the mountain with the stuff. The OSI had helicopters painted black and flew them at locations and times where Paul was sure to see them. And Paul believed it all. When you consider all the time and trouble and expense that went into deceiving Paul Benowitz, you have to ask, who ordered this and why? Was it just to discredit one UFO guy? No. Richard Doty's actual goal was to infiltrate the UFO community and flood that community with as much disinformation as possible. Then the government could observe the results of that campaign, identify possible security risks, and if necessary, neutralize them. But all of this would eventually unravel, and the truth would be revealed.